Well, hello and welcome in. It's Off the Bench, and what a week of sports ahead of us. And the band's back together. We got Trace to my right in here. It's been about a week and a half. This Off the Bench show is already off the rails in a few weeks being back here. But Stone Shields in the producer chair. Stone, good to have you back. Thank you so much for
great to be here as always. Yeah. Fired up. Red October, baby.
It's Red October. I was actually thinking about you. Last time the Reds made the postseason in a full season was 2013. You would have been in middle school?
Yes, I would have.
It's a long time.
Long time ago.
See, that's how much older we are. I was in high school. You already had kids at that point, I'm pretty sure, by 2013. No, not yet. Not yet. It was very close. But it's an exciting week in Cincinnati sports. Here we got Monday Night Football tonight with the Cincinnati Bengals. Then the next 3 nights, potentially, the next 3 nights after that, the Reds will be playing primetime against the Los Angeles Dodgers. But Trace, as the biggest Reds fan I know, biggest Reds fan I know, how does it feel to have your squad back in the postseason?
I'm thankful I came on this show specifically. I rolled in here just before we went on the air just to make sure that this wasn't going to turn sideways, because I ultimately know that there's a chance that Reed Mouse comes on off the bench the first show after the Reds clinch the postseason, and we find ourselves in a situation where, someone comes out from under the bridge. But if that happens, I'm here to somewhat try to defend. And, I guess there's 2 ways of looking at the whole season. One, in the sense that you can look at it just collectively from the lens of just the Reds themselves. And clearly it was a roller coaster of a season. There was times where I was trying to think, was like, all these people coming at you in the comments and all these things, and that happens when you're on the internet. It happens when you do shows. It happens all the time. Someone's always going to have disdain for you, regardless of who you are, how you do it. I was like, is at any point that I feel like I was being unrealistic, like overly negative, overly critical? Did I think that I was being unfair? And I really don't think I ever was. I mean, the truth is that they had an unbelievable pitching staff. I think I put out yesterday, I think I was looking back through, like, I'm not a huge numbers guy, but I was just looking back through the staffs as a whole throughout the history of the Cincinnati Reds, and obviously the 70s when you have the Big Red Machine. That's a formidable opponent. Certainly some people bring up 2012. I think that you can make an argument based off of modern technology and based off the park factor that this pitching staff that the Cincinnati Reds currently have is the best in franchise history, and it's the oldest franchise, so one would say it's the best in the oldest franchise. And I think that maybe was the thing that got overlooked the whole time, because you're just so overly upset about how abysmal the offensive output has been at times. But it doesn't matter, because ultimately you are a collection of your parts, and the Mets are finding themselves right now wondering how in the world they didn't do it, and it's because they didn't even come close to having the one thing the Reds had. So I don't know. I mean, on one hand, I'm sure from a national perspective, people are going to say, well, the Mets, they're a significantly better team than the Reds. They just got unlucky, or whatever the term you'd like to use. But I just don't know if they are. I mean, this Reds team has been competitive against all of the good teams all year long, but they've gotten swept by the A's. They lose 2 or 3 to the Pirates when you needed to win that series. They've done that really all year long, where you think as soon as you are out on them, they reel you all the way back in. So as goofy as it sounds, I think if you ask people who watch this team every single day all year long, if you felt how confident do you feel going and winning a series against the Pirates, at the same time, how confident do you feel going and winning a series against the Dodgers? I know that's a pretty drastic difference there. I don't think that the feeling changes a significant amount. It really comes down to who's pitching. And this series, thankfully, the Reds were capable of keeping Hunter Greene, and that's the most important thing that happened this weekend, is that they actually have the best arm that they could possibly ask for going Game 1. And we got a chance against the Dodgers because we play them in 3 games. I'll say that openly. I'm not afraid to say that. I'm happy to say it. You know what? I'm not going to apologize about it. If you put us against the Dodgers in a 7-game series, sure. I mean, the chances are little to none. 3-game series, and you give me our best arms with the best pitching staff possibly in Reds franchise history, it is what it is. You got a chance. And any given day, this offense can get hot enough to score 4 or 5 runs, because I think that's what's hot for this offense, if we're being honest and fair. It's house money, Reed, and I know that's always used all the time, and people, want to try to draw analogies to how you're supposed to feel for your team. If the Reds don't win this postseason series, certainly it's gonna hurt. But at the same time, the reality is I just don't think that any reasonable Reds fan can say that they were supposed to be here. We deserve to be here. I don't. Deserve's not the right word, but you never expected to be here, and that's just kind of the mindset I'm going into tomorrow with.
If it's kind of funny from the periphery, and I'm not going to do a full troll thing. I thought about it. I mean, I might get some jabs here and there, but it's not going to be the full.
You were a big reason we got there. I appreciate the Cubs and their help.
Yeah, the 92-win Cubs did get swept on a
four-gamer.
Four-gamer to the – well, that's the point is I was going to make. It felt like throughout this entire season from the periphery that every time there was some marquee game, this is a big moment for the Cincinnati Reds. They've got to win tonight. They didn't get it done, right? Like it's every single time. They sweep the Cubs. They bring home the Pittsburgh Pirates, who I don't even think won 70 games, not a very good franchise. And they're like, all right, you take care of business, you control your own destiny, and they lose the first 2 games to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Okay, we're back out on them. And then they get themselves in a chance to the final game of the year, game 162, win and you're in, and it just kind of falls. And then you're celebrating, popping champagne in an opponent's locker room after they just beat you. I'm not saying that that's not bad. I mean, like you made the postseason, you celebrate here, but it's just objectively funny from my periphery that it seems like every single time that the Reds had a chance to do something cool, to take it, they never grasped that opportunity. But here they are still playing for postseason baseball on Tuesday night against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Maybe you can say they backed themselves in. Either way, the car's in the carport. Either way, the car's in the garage. I don't know if that takes away any of the excitement for you as a fan.
No, it doesn't take the excitement away from me. I could care less how they got in. They got in. I mean, it's 0-0. And the truth is that that's the most, I guess, like enticing, exciting part about all of it is that it really doesn't matter what you did in the regular season to get to this spot. If the Reds would have won 86 games, 87 games, and the Mets didn't have a monumental collapse. I mean, I don't know if we in Cincinnati, for the casual fan, and I understand why you're a casual fan, trust me, to be a day-to-day grinder for a Major League Baseball team is not for the faint of heart. I mean, it is the ebbs and flows of it are quite absurd at times, and maybe that's why you come out and you say some of the things you say at times because you get so emotionally attached to something that you put so much time and effort into. But the reality is that the Mets had a monumental collapse. I mean, there is absolutely no fathomable way that you could ask any reasonable mind that the Cubs were going to, or not the Cubs, excuse me, but the Mets were going to finish with 83 wins. They had 45 wins on June 15th.
Best record in baseball.
June 15th. At June 15th, they were actually one game below, oddly enough, the Detroit Tigers on June 15th. Now, at one point, I do think the Mets had the best record in baseball, but that's beside the point. My whole point in saying this is they were 45-27. They were knocking on the door of 20 games over 500 well before the All-Star break, and now they find themselves finishing the season just a few games above 500. It's not something that I ultimately really am going to apologize for as a Reds fan, but I am not, I guess, lesser of a man to admit that was a huge part of what happened in the back half of the season is that the Mets just completely collapsed. Now, I'm going to give the Reds some credit for doing that because I think ultimately if the Reds didn't put pressure on the Mets, I think that they could have probably found a way to get back on their feet and find a way to get into the postseason by winning maybe more than 83 games. But as soon as the Reds won 9 of their last 13. They took care of the Cubs. They swept them 4 games straight. I think it did put a lot of pressure on the Mets. It started to feel like something that seemed so unrealistic starting to catch up to us, right? It in a weird way, to backtrack this, I don't know if you remember in 2020, Reed, but you kept asking me like, hey, this was we were in, I don't even know what, like the fall of 2020. And you were like, hey, have you read about this COVID-19
it was like January. Yeah, I was like, this might get bad.
Have you read about this COVID-19 thing or whenever it was? And I was just like, no, I haven't. I mean, I'm too busy worrying about all these other things. That seems like you're telling me that there's a pandemic that's going to shut the world down. It just seemed, I guess that my point is as the Mets clubhouse and probably even their fans outside of obviously Frank, because I think that's a bit anyways, I don't think that they thought this was realistic to happen to them. And then all of a sudden, when the Reds were able to sweep the Cubs, I think that was like the light bulb switch. Right, it got really real. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you kind of gave yourself a chance. The Reds gave themselves a chance, and I think the Mets let them in. But who cares? It doesn't really matter. I mean, they have a chance to go to L.A., and I am thankful that they're going to play a team like the Dodgers in a 3-game set because I think ultimately if it was like the old school way where you had to play a 5 or 7 gamer right off the rip, there's just not a lot of, I guess, in my opinion, realistic people that would expect them to be able to go and do that. But a 3-game set, 100%.
Can you imagine if it was the anxiety-ridden 1-game wild card game, and you would love your odds. Like you would prefer it. You'd prefer it as a Reds fan. Like, hey, Hunter Greene versus Yamamoto. Let's do 1 game. We'll play 9 innings to see who moves on.
Yes.
And I mean, it would get so tense in Chavez Ravine, Dodger Stadium. They would be on edge, knowing that this team was supposed to win 110 games or whatever it is, and here they are fighting for 1 game to move on in the postseason. But
facing an 83-win team too, like
right.
That's the thing I think the Reds have going for them. Is I 100% believe that there's a chance that the narrative around them when you play the Reds is that you have to beat these guys. Yeah. I mean, look at this lineup. And to be fair to many of these teams that you're going to go up against in the postseason, you're going to probably have that type of narrative surrounding the series, which is how could you possibly lose to the Reds in the postseason when you have all of these star-studded lineups? When you look on the other side, and again, I'm not going to be disrespectful to any of our guys here, but I'm just saying in general, it's not something that you fear all that often when you look at this lineup. Now, it depends on what Tito's going to do in the postseason and the lineup that he put out, because I actually think, Reed, they have a chance to put out a lineup that's pretty formidable. I would like, I don't say I like our chances because I think that makes it sound a little over the top, but I think that there's a way to construct this lineup that makes you feel pretty damn confident if you're a Reds fan. I will openly say, was it a wild move yesterday to have Trevino, Hayes, and McLean 7, 8, 9 in a you have to consider it a must-win game on 162 to get in. It obviously ended up not being a must-win game because thankfully the Miami Marlins did it. But I'm also not naive, and maybe that's why people they get upset at me, because I'm a realist as much as I can be. The fact of the matter is that we would be having a completely different conversation today if the Miami Marlins just went out and played terrible baseball.
Right.
If they made a litany of errors, 4, 5, 6 errors, they went out there, they gave up 6 or 7 runs in the first inning, what would be the narrative around this baseball team, and what would everybody be saying right now? I know for damn well what it would be. They had 3 automatic outs at the bottom of the lineup in a must-win game. They let Gavin Lux hit against a left-handed pitcher in the middle of the game when they had Austin Hayes, who's a capable hitter, against left-handed pitching, but also could play left field. There was a massive amount of things yesterday that was really indicative to a lot of the things that Reed, I think a lot of us fans were frustrated with all year long, but it doesn't matter because the result was positive. And I guess ultimately it depends on what type of person you are. Are you a result-driven person that you look at the world and you see whatever happens you're good with, as long as it's a good outcome you're happy with? Or are you a process-oriented person where you think to yourself, all right, this outcome happened, but what did you do, and what did you do before that to give yourself a chance to have the best possible outcome? And did you do that? Because if you didn't do it, then you should probably fix it, because you can't sit there and survive on results your whole entire life. Now, having said that, it doesn't matter, because, and again, that's where people are going to be like, well, why is he talking about that? I'm just saying in general. It just seems like, and I know it's ebbs and flows of being a fan. Yeah. I get it. But at the end of the day, I'm man enough to admit that it took 2 parties here to tango. And I'm very appreciative of the Mets. And I love the Mets, and I've loved the Miami Marlins for making it happen, and I am not going to apologize for being in the playoffs for it.
Yeah, it's funny because you're obviously, you said if the Mets would have won yesterday and they're in the postseason, and with you guys losing, the conversation today would be around Terry Francona and the way that he managed that final game. And he's kind of been a powder keg around Reds fan base, to where the guys that that don't pay attention to the day-to-day. They just look at, hey, did we win today? Did we lose today? They're not worried about it. And they see that a guy like Terry Francona has won pretty much everywhere he's been in his career. The guys that do care about the process, and they're like, man, why are we constantly putting these hitters in bad matchups? Why are we doing this? Why are we putting these pitchers in bad matchups? They're obviously not too fond of Terry Francona and his managing style. So I'll ask you this question.
Sure.
We go back to March, before Ian Gibaut trotted out there in that 9th inning, before opening day. If I'd have sat here in this office and I told you the following: Elly De La Cruz will underperform. Matt McLain, by the end of the season, will have 90% of this fan base hating him. Yeah. Your highest paid positional player will be DFA'd 2 months into the season. Jake Fraley won't be a part of the team at all. Tyler Stevenson will play fewer than 90 games. Spencer Steer who's kind of supposed to be like your one anchor professional hitter in the lineup, he has a bad season at the plate. But come October, you're going to be playing a game in LA. What would I have told you? Like, what would I have, if I told you all that, how would you have thought that the Red season would have gone?
I thought they'd have won 75 games, but the only way that you could have said that they would have won more is because they have maybe arguably the best pitching staff in the history of the franchise. And I think that's where we just completely have undersold what they were capable of doing and what they did do. I mean, this team lost 3 straight 1-0 baseball games earlier this year. They survived it. This team lost an opportunity just the other day when they had an opening series game against the Mets where you felt like you absolutely needed to gain ground on a team who was already, I believe at that time, 4 games up on us. They were 4 games up on us, and we were incapable of getting a run in with the bases loaded and nobody out. The truth is that I will give Terry Francona all the credit for one thing and one thing only, specifically for what I do know. Okay, I know that you can get into the matchups, and I know people can get frustrated about, maybe the management, in-game management style that he has, and maybe some of the times where he does seemingly pick favorites, all of that. But one thing I do know that really is incapable of being calculated is the grit and the determination and the belief and all of these things that feels like these guys did have. Every time, to be fair to anybody that watched this team on a day-to-day basis, anytime you felt like this team was dead, they did rally back. They found a way to make it interesting yet again. And you got to give credit to somebody for that. Mm-hmm. And obviously Tito's the one guy that comes to mind for me because he's the head of the helm, and you're going to get all the credit in the world, just like the quarterback. You'll get all the credit in the world when things go right, and you'll also get all the blame when things go bad. So Tito, again, what his grade is on the year and all those types of things. Some people are going to say he got an A+ because of just the fact that they got in the postseason yet again, and they're going to use that as the metric. And I get it. It's basically a result-based business. This is what it is. Professional sports, nobody really gives a damn at the end of the day whether your process is good and all these things are good if you don't win. And if you do win, the Chiefs' perspective, or even let's go back and say even the Patriots at a time, if you want to use dynasties for an instance, no one's going to be able to convince anybody that they had a bad process or weren't doing the right things, because at the end of the day, they won. The results speak for themselves. So Tito gets the credit for that, but I do think it'd be unfair to just say that this was all Tito or whatever term you'd want to use there. It's a collective, and I think I put out a post yesterday just trying to be not snarky, really. I wasn't trying to be snarky, but I was saying that I see all these people getting all the credit in the world about the 2025 season and this, that, and the nature, and it's Tito this and Tito that, and it's just like, listen, there's been one mainstay at this organization, and his name's Derek Johnson, and he's been here for years, and he's continued to progress and make this pitching staff better and better and better and better. And you went into this season dropping a guy like Rhett Lauder, who I think many of us felt like was hoping to take a next step and be a part of that rotation, and they've done nothing but succeed and do it in a major, major way. Tito Francona also should get credit for managing the bullpen. They've been very, very good all year long. I know that Santian and those guys felt like they got run into the ground at some point, but they just didn't. They've been here all year and they've produced. So I guess it just depends on how you want to look at it. If you want to look at it from the lens that you got fortunate from getting in the playoffs, go ahead. I don't care how you look at it. But there's 0-0. You get to play against the Dodgers in a 3-game set. And I don't want to get overly crazy about it, but I think they have a legitimate chance. I really do. I mean, all you need to do is just get a little bit fortunate, I would call it that, in the first few innings in Dodger Stadium and get a couple runs on the board. Hopefully the offense kind of feels like, all right, this is our time, and it snowballs. The same way it snowballed for the Mets, I'm hoping it does it in reverse reaction, I guess, for the Cincinnati Reds, and they get hot at the right time offensively. Because if they can do that, I mean, as stupid as it sounds, and people are going to make fun of this, I'm not kidding when I say it, like, they could win the World Series if their offense performs above what I would call league average for the playoffs. It's not been the case all season long, but if they're capable of doing that for a month and a half, something crazy could happen because they have a pitching staff that is good enough to do it. I said it on this show, I think the last time I was here, and I'll say it once again. If the offense had the same statistical advantage across the entire league as this pitching staff has, they would be the World Series favorites. And it's insane to say out loud, but that's how good this pitching staff has been. Now, it's scary to always rely on a baseball game where you feel like you got to hold the opponent to 2 runs or less,
right,
and you see the lineup of the Dodgers. I'm not naive in saying that. So we'll see. I mean, house money, I don't want to say who cares, because of course you care, but it feels good to be a Reds fan and actually for the first time in a long time have something to look forward to in October.
Yeah, it's funny because there certainly are some people that are giving all the credit to Terry Frank, and
right.
You understand why, right? It's the same thing we just talked about. That's when you view things through the lens of results as opposed to the process. You're like, well, we brought in this guy that has won everywhere, and he first year as the coach here. We're in the postseason. He must be the reason why we're in here. Obviously, we know there's more nuance to that, but I think you brought up a really good point. And the thing that you can never quantify, you'll never be able to quantify, you'll never be able to see it, and it drives analytical people crazy because you can't quantify it, is how valuable a manager is towards being in that clubhouse. I've said this for the longest time. Every team, sports team that I've ever been around, every sports team seemingly from the outside, seems to take the personality of their leader. That just seems to be. Those Patriots teams for the longest time had the same personality as Bill Belichick. These Chiefs teams that had been good for seem to have the same personality as Andy Reid, and you see that in baseball more than anything, to where this Terry Francona guy who's kind of gritty, they kind of fed off that. That was their personality as a team. So there is something to quantify there, and I think to say, well, you can't quantify it, that doesn't exist, would be silly, because these teams obviously find some value in it because they're willing to pay someone millions of dollars to do this job, right? These teams, these billionaires, these millionaires that run these organizations, if they didn't see value in it, they simply wouldn't pay someone that much money to take that job. You just wouldn't do it because that's too much money. Like, well, I don't know what Terry Francona is making. You just wouldn't pay someone if you think that it's not a valuable position. But obviously it is, because if you get in the clubhouse, you understand that they do feed off those things from time to time. I will say this about having a pitching-focused team as opposed to a hitting-focused team. Undoubtedly, when you have an offensive-driven team, it's more fun. It's certainly more fun to score 12 runs in a game, and you get a game that's 12-8. But when you get in these high-pressure situations, you'd prefer to have the pitching-oriented team. And you look at the teams that have won the World Series over the last few years in these small market teams. Like if you think about these teams, all these wild card teams that go on to win the World Series, the great majority of them were these pitching-focused teams. So that's you say you've got a real shot, and I absolutely agree with you that where, hey, it's going to be anxiety-ridden when the Dodgers put up 3 runs and the first 3 innings, you're like, oh man, we might be cooked here. But also, you like your odds if you do take a 2-0 lead to be like, hey, we can shut this thing down.
Yeah, I think it travels better, if that's kind of the word that we could use. I think that the pitching 100% can be a little more consistent over a short period of time than hitting can ever be. And I do understand the idea that you'd like to have an offense that has the firepower, but the reality is I think if you gave me the option of one or the other, if you'd like to have an elite pitching staff or would you rather have an elite hitting over a 3-game series, to be very, very clear, I'm going to 100% take the pitching, and I think that that's where I feel very confident that the Reds have a legitimate chance. Of course, if you went to anybody from a national perspective and you asked them what they thought about the Reds, I think that they probably wouldn't take the Reds all that serious because, to be fair, they just don't have this mantra to them that is all that daunting. But the reality is that they've just not seen Hunter Greene at his peak, more than likely. They've not seen Nick Lodolo at his peak, more than likely. They've not seen Andrew Abbott basically be able to kind of spot pitches time and time again and get guys out consistently, even though it doesn't feel or seem like he has something that's crazy overpowering. And again, you see Tony Santillan come out of the pen. Are you really all that worried from a national perspective? Probably not. But he's been really, really good. Connor Phillips has been look like the nasty boys the last 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden you add in Chase Burns. You give again, Emilio Pagan's done his job all year for the most part. Like, this is a very formidable opportunity that the Reds present themselves with when they go in and play these 3-game sets. Now, different story, as I said before, when you get into the 7-gamers. I think that is completely different. And if we find ourselves in a 7-game series, you know what I'd say? We're playing with house money yet again, and we're playing obviously pretty damn good baseball, and we'll see how the chips fall. We'll let them chips fall where they may. So, you got to just, I guess, at this point, analyze this every single way you want and try to make your mind up of the way in which this postseason will go. I just don't think that you can do it. As Nick's brought up on Chatterbox Reds multiple times. The Cardinals have won World Series by sneaking into the playoffs. Yeah. The Diamondbacks the Diamondbacks just a few years ago get in. I think they got in with 83 or 84 wins, and they found themselves in the World Series. It's the exciting thing about baseball, and I think it's, to be fair, if you are a great team, the one thing that you could be completely upset about in the way that the MLB playoffs is constructed is that you play 162 games to try to figure out who the best teams are. And then they give a team like the Reds, and I'm just trying to be fair and honest here, you give a team like the Reds that only have to go into Dodger Stadium for 3 games, and they only have to win 2 of them, and they could end the Dodger season, when collectively the Dodgers have been significantly better from the aggregate all year long than the Reds have been. It's a huge advantage for the Reds. The chance that you can sneak in the way that they did and get an opportunity to quite literally be in the same spot as the Los Angeles Dodgers are. The only difference is they get to play in LA versus Cincinnati. That's the only difference when it comes to what the same advantages are for those 2 franchises. And I'd openly say this is the reality of it. I think, and I know people are going to say this, that I'm crazy for saying this, I think if you gave me the option of whether or not you would want to play in Cincinnati or you wanted to play in LA, and you just stripped away all of the meaning to it, of course I'd want to go down to the ballpark. Of course I would love for it to be in Cincinnati for the city. Take all that away, and you just said, hey, you got to play in an empty stadium in one ballpark or the other. I think by far LA's ballpark fits this baseball team significantly better, oddly enough, and maybe that's some of the frustration you hear from time to time on some of this fan base. This roster seems to be constructed better for their ballpark versus ours. And I will I'm not saying I'm excited and thankful that it's in LA, but I'm not upset about it either.
Yeah, it's fun. There's certainly some teams that have been able. Baseball is beautiful in the fact. I actually saw this stat recently about how, like, in baseball, how just kind of random the postseason can be. The wild card started in baseball in 1995, so we've had exactly 30 playoffs with the wild card. 7 wild card teams have won the World Series. To see how drastic that is compared to football, they've had the wild card series since 1970, so 55 years, and they've had the same number of wild card teams win the Super Bowl, 7. So just, you get in the dance in baseball, you've got a shot. You talked about the Cardinals back in 2006. I think they were 82-80. And they ended up winning the World Series. Now, did that Cardinals team have maybe the best right-handed hitter of all time in their lineup, Albert Pujols, in the height of his, he's the NL MVP that year? I think Chris Carpenter won the NL Cy Young that year. The rest of the team wasn't very good, but they did have those things. Maybe someday we'll be talking about Elly De La Cruz the same way that we talk about Albert Pujols. We'll see about that. But I can almost kind of imagine, the DVD that they put out after the Reds, if the Reds win the World Series, and you remember it all, the 30 for 30 about the Reds thing, and you imagine, the loud chants of Dodger Stadium in that first inning, and Hunter Greene, who we here in Cincinnati know is a bona fide ace and is one of the best pitchers in the league. They might not know it down in Southern California, and I don't even know if the Dodgers lineup is still set up like this, but, Hunter Greene's going off and facing Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Hall of Famer. One of them might be the greatest baseball player of all time. And, I can just see the 30 for 30, strikeout. It just kind of sets the tone for an entire playoff run. But that's wishful thinking. That's just me thinking in terms of storylines and whatnot. The simple fact of the matter is the Reds will be playing down in Chavez Ravine. You take 2 of 3 from there, and you get a chance to take on the Philadelphia Phillies, and you get to keep the series alive, and you get to keep moving from there. So that's all you're hoping, and you've got a good chance. Go ahead, Trace.
I was going to say, final point that I have before we move on to the Cincinnati Bengals. They obviously have a big game tonight. Is this. I think it's going to be quite poetic and funny a little bit if they can find a way to win Game 1, because they're going to go into, in my humble opinion, they're going to go into Game 2, which will be an elimination game for the Dodgers if we're capable of winning Game 1, and they're going to see Gavin Lux hitting third. I'm genuinely saying, as a Dodgers fan, there's a genuine chance that you could be looking at yourself in the mirror in the morning and asking yourself, how in the world did we get here? We are playing a team.
The guy that we just got rid of for the scrap heap.
Yeah, we are playing a team that is hitting Gavin Lux, a guy that we kind of honestly just were like, yeah, he's just not good enough to probably help us win for our team. So let's just package him up. We'll send him out. We'll get somebody in return that we like. Maybe they can help us in years down the line. But we'll just send him along. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're playing an elimination game, and Gavin Lux is hitting in the 3-hole against the team that you're playing in the postseason. Now, I just find that in a way that's just funny to me. That's just so funny. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
To give credit to the Dodgers, everyone thinks, like, this is just me going on a side tangent here. Everyone talks about the Dodgers, and yes, they spend billions of dollars. They gave Shohei Ohtani $700 million, and they spend all this money. Yamamoto's getting $300 million. But also is a testament to their development system that the 3-hole hitter for the Reds is a guy that they just got rid of because they didn't have a chance for him to play. They're just like, hey, this is a playoff team, but your 3-hole hitter, yeah, he just couldn't make it here. The Cubs, who won 92 games, our best hitter was a guy that they're just like, yeah, we can't. Michael Busch, yeah, we got no spot for him. We got this Hall of Fame first baseman, Freddie Freeman, playing first base. Michael Busch ain't gonna get a chance to play anytime. And here, Michael Busch, it's just a testament to how good the Dodgers have been and why there will be continual World Series.
They're not just like the thing is people probably do view the Dodgers as like, oh, they spend all this money.
Right. They think of them really like win. The mid-2000s Yankees. They're not like that.
They really win in a way because they do everything great. And I mean, I think anybody that follows the game knows that. And they also, not only do they spend money in the standpoint of being able to get players, they spend a lot of money on resources that allow them to be able to draft well, and they have everything that you could want in the Dodgers organization. But the truth is like I just said, the most hilarious thing about all of it is the only thing that separates the same situation that we find ourselves in as the Dodgers is that they get to play 3 games at home. Congratulations. Of all the things that you get.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the exact odds for the Reds here in this series. They
plus
205.
I'll take that.
Those are fantastic odds. And in a way to segue it in, I typed in a parlay calculator to see the betting lines for the Bengals games. Tonight they are, I think, 7.5-point underdogs. And then they already have the line out for this Sunday against the Detroit Lions, where the Bengals at home are going to be 9-point underdogs, 8.5-point underdogs, depending on which book you look at. It is more likely that the Reds win a lot more likely, by the way, by betting odds, that the Reds win in L.A. than the Bengals win either one of their next 2 games, both tonight and this Sunday, just to show you exactly where the Reds are at. So that'll be our way to segue into the Monday Night Football talk, which will take up a good portion of the rest of this show. And we'll give a quick word to our sponsors here. The Job Center is now hiring. Start working fast with weekly pay, flexible shifts, and great opportunities at top local employers. Apply in person at any location across 12 states or online at thejobcenter.com. Light up your events with Queen City Screens. Our cutting-edge LED video boards deliver vibrant visuals, crystal clear displays for any occasion. From concerts to corporate events, we've got you covered. Visit queencityscreens.com to rent your LED solution today. Queen City Screens, where brilliance meets impact. Final note that we'll have before we really shift it over into Bengals talk, and we haven't got him involved too much in this show, but I wanted to get Stone's opinions and just your overall thoughts and the Reds being in the postseason for the first time since you were a wee lad. In a full season since 2013. They obviously did it in the COVID season, but since a wee lad, the Reds are playing postseason baseball. How does that make you feel, Stone?
Feels incredible. Lots of ups and downs, obviously, throughout the course of this season here to this point. Lots of people, myself included, kind of quit on the team through various points of the season. I thought, the series in Sacramento against the A's, when you get swept there, it kind of just like, all right, it was a fun run, but let's turn the page to hopefully figuring out what's going to go on with the Bengals, and then we'll think about 2026 and the Reds. But they just did not go away, and they kept fighting. And I was sitting there, and I've never been so disconnected on an NFL Sunday, I don't think, in my life, because I'm just sitting there tapped into the Reds. Had the Ryder Cup on a little bit. That was a disaster. We'll talk about that later today. But just seeing the celebration in the clubhouse and seeing Jim Day, right? This guy's been covering the team for so long, and he's done a tremendous job, in my opinion. Just seeing him having that moment in the clubhouse with the guys. He's interviewing everybody. They're going crazy, dumping stuff on his head. So it was just absolutely incredible. I'm fired up. And, it's a 3-game series. If it's a 5-game or a 7-game, you're like, we're just kind of happy to be here, what have you. But you got Hunter Greene, who's second best pitcher in the National League, I would say. He's taken the mound in Los Angeles, has an opportunity to set the tone, and I'm fired up. I think they have a real chance to do some damage in LA, and that's certainly very exciting.
Yeah, it's Starts tomorrow. It starts tomorrow. In the final thing is, do you think that the MLB should change their end of the season, or do you think it's fine the way it is? Because I was thinking about it, and I was like, so their final game of the year, game 162, ends on NFL Sunday. Yeah. And it feels like that would be a classic opportunity to zig or zag, to like, hey, maybe you finish the season on Friday when people aren't paying attention. Then I just started thinking about how often does the season come down to the last game of the year. And if you're going to be interested in that final game of the year, you're going to watch it anyways. Like it probably helped that the Bengals didn't play yesterday, but every Reds fan was locked into that game and locked into the Mets game. So maybe I'm trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, and maybe they should just keep it as is. But
I think what they end up doing is they prioritize the postseason. If I had to guess, they probably are looking at like, okay, if you finish the regular season on Sunday, then you're capable of kind of setting it up to where there's no football on when you have the first 3 postseason games. And then if you do that, then game 5, 6, and 7, or game 5 for the following series might fall on this date. And I'm guessing that's what they do, but I'll ultimately openly say I don't think Major League Baseball really puts enough time, effort, and energy into marketing, like just the concepts of like, okay, like how could we possibly use anything at our advantage for us? And yesterday was a perfect example of that. I agree with you to a certain extent. Or if nothing else, you could try to come up with maybe a weird situation to where if you were to have the game on Monday, right, and you shift everything back, maybe there's a chance that you don't even give an off day to some of the wild card teams. Punish them for not winning. I don't know. I mean, it's easy to sit up here right now and say this is what they should have done, but I think the most important thing yesterday is that they could have tried to make the games accessible, like make it like an MLB free TV day. I think that there's a lot of people that I know that just have been. And to be rightfully so, like I don't care about people jumping on the bandwagon. I know people maybe get frustrated by that. I could care less. Like there's a lot of people
Isn't
that I
a
know.
Weird thing?
I was just saying there's a lot of people that I know that were asking me like how they could watch the Reds yesterday, right? And it's just like, well, I know it's probably their first game. Like in a weird way, it's probably maybe their first, second, third game. They watched opening day and they've maybe not watched a whole lot since, and then they're trying to figure out how to watch them yesterday. And the only answer I have for them is that they have to have a FanDuel Network subscription, or they got to be able to be wise enough to know how to get on the internet and find a link, or have a VPN and have MLB TV. Right. Like all that stuff is just so over the heads of so many people that are just looking to turn their television on, really. You wonder why, I guess, the NFL wins is because they are fortunate enough to have one game a week, and more times than not, the game's on the local television station, and it's easy. It's just easy for people to find the team that they're looking to root for and watch. That's a discussion for another day. I think the CBA will hopefully try to address some of these things, but I don't know. It'll be the cool thing is that the Reds are going to play a postseason series where they're not going to be playing during the day, which I think. The last time I remember with the Reds playing extremely meaningful baseball games during the postseason, you had to find a way to get off work, or you had to basically sneak out of work early. And then also I think back in the 5th game of the NLDS that we all don't fondly remember, as we all know, against the Giants, was played at like what seemed like 1 o'clock or something. It just seems like now. For Reds fans, it's going to be on a major cable provider with ESPN. It's going to be easily accessible for the vast majority of the people. It's going to come on at 9 o'clock at night, and they are going to all be able to at least easily follow along, which is a nice thing for our community, I guess, if you will, and looking forward to it. So.
Yeah, and I saw the crew that they're going to have. I think it's Boog Shambi, who does a really good job in national games and stuff like that. So I think
I like how you drop the national games.
Yeah, no, I don't like when he does the Cubs games. I wish he was a little more of a fan. He's a little too unbiased for a local. Like Reds fans get mad about John Sadak losing his mind all the time. I'd prefer that than someone who's indifferent. Like I want you're the voice of the fan. Like be a fan a little bit.
Right.
Neither here nor there, and it's cool that the Reds are going to be playing a prime time game.
Are you trying to avoid Monday Night Football for a reason, or?
Yeah, I just don't.
I'm just curious.
I'm okay. We'll get into it. So the Cincinnati Bengals play the Denver Broncos tonight. They go to Denver, and as we all know, the Bengals are coming off their worst loss in franchise history. It was a 38-point loss against the Minnesota Vikings, who just lost yesterday. And maybe the Vikings were supposed to be really good. Then you watch them play, and they're like, once again, you're like, oh man, I don't know what's going on with this team, but the Cincinnati Bengals will be taking on Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, Sean Payton. And you walked into this office this morning, and I said, did you see the spread for the Bengals game this Sunday? As if Trace Fowler was ever going to look at look-ahead lines for the Cincinnati Bengals. And he goes, no, but I saw the spread tonight, and yikes. And I was like, yeah, 7.5 points against a 1-2 Denver Broncos team that has Bo Nix, who, according to PFF, is the worst graded quarterback in the National Football League this year, or the second worst. He's one of the bottom two. And you're playing a team that has not looked very good. But then you start thinking about the matchups between the two teams. And you go, okay, let's break this down, position by position. Who's got the better coach, the Denver Broncos or the Cincinnati Bengals? And you're like, well, Sean Payton's a better coach than Zach Taylor. No one can deny that. All right, who's got the better quarterback in this situation? Maybe Trace will disagree with this, but it's probably Bo Nix, the first overall draft pick who went 10-7 in his first year as the starting quarterback. So we'll take him over Jake Browning. Neither here nor there. You can pick straws. All right, who's got the better offensive line? Well, the Denver Broncos. Who's got the better defensive line? Well, the Denver Broncos. Who's got the better secondary? The Denver Broncos. And the one area where the Bengals are probably better than the Broncos is, skill positions, because you got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And, you add all those things up, and you're just not looking at a great matchup. And that's all games are, is matchups. How do we draw against your team? And it's not looking great for the Cincinnati Bengals. The only thing that you can potentially hope for is a immaculate coaching situation with Zach Taylor where your team gets embarrassed the week prior and you kind of galvanize behind that game and go, this isn't who we are. We've got to turn this thing. This isn't who we are. And you kind of play with a chip on your shoulder, knowing that, everyone gave you kind of one. You started out 2-0. Everyone gave you one shot. How for real is this Bengals team? They lost. They won 2 games that they probably should have lost. All right, and they're playing a backup quarterback in Minnesota. How for real is this team? Can this team still be kind of scrappy and frisky and make a postseason run? And then you lose by 38 points, and everyone's like, all right, well, that's the end of the Bengals. And just the interest that you had around the Cincinnati Bengals in the national media just gets thrown by the wayside, and you're like, this team's not very good. They're not very good without Joe Burrow, and we kind of knew this, and sometimes they're not very good with Joe Burrow. So can you galvanize a team around that? Like, hey, everyone's writing you off. Everyone thinks that you are not very good. You're not a serious team. You're not a serious contender. The AFC North looks to be up for grabs as the Baltimore Ravens are 1-3. The Pittsburgh Steelers have won a couple games, but they don't look that great. And the Cleveland Browns are the Cleveland Browns. Can you do something fun? Can you do something exciting? Can it start here tonight in Denver? All the logic in my brain, everything that I just laid out about how we are at a disadvantage at pretty much every single spot on the field besides skill positions, tells you, all right, you understand why it's plus 380 for the Bengals to win tonight, why it's minus 500 for the Denver Broncos to win, why the spread's 7.5 over a touchdown with the hook. You understand it. But then the fandom comes back in and says, screw it. If the Reds can, with all their entire offense being terrible, why can't the Bengals, with Jake Browning turning the ball over 8 times in 6.5 quarters, why can't they win a game tonight in Denver against the worst quarterback in the PFF grade this season, Bo Nix? That's the only thing I've got for you, is I don't know how you can – the only hope that you have tonight is you can kind of galvanize and, you play with a chip and, a fire's lit on your rear end.
Right.
Tonight here on Monday Night Football.
I think that it comes down to anytime you get in a spot where the Bengals are at, you're going to have some timely turnovers. You're going to have to do what the Bengals did when they were going really, really, really well under Lou Anarumo, who, shout out to him, by the way. It seems like he's doing
it's funny because everyone knew when we fired him, they're like, I thought he was supposed to be a great defensive coordinator, but that's sometimes when things go wrong, you just gotta fire someone.
Right, yeah. It's but nonetheless, he seems to be doing okay, so shout out to him. But I guess my point is just saying that you got to find a way to do something on either special teams that's special or you got to find a way to turn the ball over for the opponent. And the Bengals are finding themselves in a tough spot. And I got to admit, I'm starting to change the narrative around what I used to think about Joe Burrow based off of the situation that currently exists around this team, because I had for the longest time said that the Bengals really have found a way to be successful with Joe Burrow. It's not Joe Burrow just completely putting the organization on his back and carrying them. Now, having said that, I don't know how the season would have gone with Joe Burrow at the helm. Let's face it, they played a very, very ugly game in Cleveland. And yes, I understand that ultimately injuries happened and you never know how the season would have gone for the next few months with him. And I don't want to just say just because he played poorly in Cleveland that means it would have gone poorly for the rest of the season. So on one end, I don't know how the season would have gone with Joe Burrow, but I do know this. There's just zero chance in the world that they would ever be 7-point dogs against all of these opponents that they find themselves being 7-point dogs against. They would have never went into Minnesota, in my humble opinion, and gotten the absolute
you would have lost by 38 points.
Yeah, break speed off of them. The amount of competitive advantage that he brings versus what I thought that he brought is probably significantly different. So, from a respect level to Joe Burrow, it's only gone up for me because at this point, I guess the bigger concern would be is if Zach Taylor's incapable of rallying the troops here, and I don't care what the odds are, but if you can't find a way to win just enough games to be competitive to when Joe Burrow comes back, you have a puncher's chance. Well, then you're starting to, at least in my opinion, and this is the funny thing about this show, is that we do have varying views about the local team. Obviously, for the Reds, I have blinders on most of the time. At least I try not to be, but I probably do it from time to time. And you certainly look at the Reds as an outside perspective, and you kind of giggle probably at the 90% of the things that are said about the Reds. And I do very much the same thing for the Bengals, right? It's like I look at the Bengals holistically from the outside looking in, and I'm thinking to myself, there's just really not a whole lot there to get excited about. But I do understand that the Bengals fans are excited that they got T. Higgins back. They got Jamar Chase back. They got a Fant coming in. They got Joe Burrow at the helm. That's all fine and dandy, but the reality is the roster build, I guess, at this point is starting to showcase itself. And that's the bigger, I guess, concern would be is if you're incapable of being competitive tonight, you're incapable of being competitive next week, at what point do you say, we've got to fix something around here, and it's not just going to be, we have Joe Burrow, we've got it all figured out. And I know, listen, that has nothing to do with Monday Night Football tonight, but I think more importantly than anything, the result matters. It's the NFL. It's a result-based business, as we just said previously in the show. That is what professional sports is. But there is, I'm not saying moral victories are everything, but I'm somebody that actually does believe that there are moral victories in sports. You can play really, really well, lose, tip your cap, and feel incredibly encouraged moving on to the next week, right? I compare it to where if you're struggling in baseball, yes, you might go 0 for 4, but if you're struggling and you hit 3 balls extremely hard, you don't leave that game the same way you would if you struck out 4 times. You just don't. That's the reality of the situation. I think the same thing can be said about the Bengals. If you go out and you're competitive, you find yourself in a close game that doesn't go your way, there's a belief system, in my opinion, that will get picked up within that locker room that says, okay, we can be competitive. If you go out and you get the break speed off of you by the Broncos, and the week prior you got the break speed off of you by the Vikings, who, oh, by the way, just went and lost to another division foe in the Steelers, you start to lose. I'm not saying that they're there yet, but you're going to lose the locker room. You're just going to. People are adults in that locker room. They're going to look at the situation and say, yeah, we're cooked.
Well, if you don't win one of the next 3 games, and the next 3 games are games you're going to be under touchdown favorites in every single one of them. Obviously, tonight against Denver, you're 8.5-point favorite or dogs on the road or at home against Detroit next week. And then you're going to go to Green Bay the week after that. You're going to be under a touchdown favorite there. But you are right about there are moral victories here in the league. I mean, just take a look at Sunday Night Football last night. The Dallas Cowboys versus the Green Bay Packers. Dak Prescott smiling walking off the field of the tie, and I guarantee there was less than 10 words said on that flight back to Green Bay, Wisconsin for the Packers. So, sometimes it is just about proving, hey, you can compete here tonight. If you don't win one of the next 3 games, it's going to get ugly here in a hurry. I've said that now ever since Joe Burrow went down, that looking at this schedule, there's some games at the end of October where you play the Jets and the Bears that you feel confident about, scrapping out a win or 2 there. And you look at the back end of the year when you're playing the Browns and the Dolphins and the Cardinals, hey, maybe you can get some wins there. And, at the end of it, you might be floating around anywhere between 7 and 10 wins. But simple fact of the matter is if you don't win one of these next 3 games, there's going to be some serious conversations about what the heck you do with Trey Hendrickson, who's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. What the heck do you do? Is this team even worth keeping a T. Higgins around? Do you start shilling off some pieces and kind of, scrap this whole thing new? I don't know what conversations are going to happen in that front office. If that happens, let's hope that we never get there. But you've got to be able to compete here tonight. And I think a big part of that starts with Jake Browning. Everyone talked about Jake Browning, and And, Trace was ahead of this 2 years ago when Joe Burrow was dealing with the calf injury, and we were telling him, Jake Browning's terrible, Jake Browning's terrible. He's like, well, Joe Burrow is playing terrible. Maybe you should start playing Jake Browning. And he was right. Jake Browning played well at the end of that season when Joe Burrow went down. But I'll tell you right now, when you're a backup quarterback with a mediocre roster at best, you simply cannot turn the ball over 8 times in 6.5 quarters, which is what he has done since he took over the starting role when Joe Burrow went down. Simply cannot happen. When you are a backup quarterback, you've got to hold on to that ball for dear life. I like Jake Browning because he's not afraid to make big plays. And granted, I know that 3 of those 8 turnovers are fumbles by other players on the team. I get it, understand it. But still, 5 interceptions in 6.5 quarters is less than ideal. I like Jake Browning because he's courageous enough to try and make big plays. And you have the ability to make big plays when you have guys like Jamar Chase. Anytime Jamar Chase gets the ball in open field, he has the ability to break it open for 40, 50 yards, a touchdown. T. Higgins has the ability to make big plays. So you have the skills to make big plays, and I like the courageousness of Jake Browning. But you simply cannot, especially with a mediocre defense at the very best. That's what we're hoping, the very best for this Bengals defense. It's probably in the bottom third once again, and maybe even near towards the bottom of the league once again in defense. You cannot give their team more opportunities to score the ball. You've got to hold on to the ball for dear life. You've got to shorten the game, and I think a big part of that is running the ball. Chase Brown has been ineffective, and it's a big part because of the offensive line. Shout out to everyone that took Chase Brown in their fantasy leagues because he had 1,400 yards from the line of scrimmage last year. Well, he's through 3 games got 90 yards, and he's getting, I think the stat that I saw, and I'm paraphrasing the stat, it's not an exact stat, his hit before first contact is in the negatives, like negative 40 yards, meaning he's consistently being hit behind the line of scrimmage. The fact that he's got 90 yards at all is really a testament to Chase Brown as a player. This team needs to take the run game more seriously. I've, for a long time, said the run game doesn't need to be a big part of this Bengals offense because with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, all these pieces that they've got, we're going to be a passing offense. That just simply is. But you've got to make the other teams at least threaten that they've got to put more guys in the box to open up the perimeter. Right now, our line is getting absolutely nothing. It's an unimaginative run game. You've got to be able to push the ball to at least make the defense think that you're going to commit to the run, and just so that their defensive line isn't the only one that's able to stop it. And that's going to help out Jake Browning. Those are the only ways in which you can beat a Denver team at their home stadium here tonight on Monday Night Football. I'm just hoping, I guess, for a miracle in these next 2 weeks, these next 2 games.
Well, if you want a little bit of, as we
solace?
say on this show,
Solace.
Yeah, I think if you want to have some solace here, what you could do is you could put a parlay together of the Bengals losing their next 3 games. If you said they had to lose their next 3 games for you to win the bet, I think that you'd be coming around. You'd be coming around to a spot where I think it'd be a little more realistic to get one of them, right? So there is that. The issue with the Bengals right now is simply put, they put a lot of eggs in one basket, and unfortunately one of those eggs fell out of the basket and it cracked, and Joe Burrow's unfortunately out, and that's part of it. You put an unimaginable, to be honest, from an outsider perspective, an unimaginable amount of money into skilled positions, wide receiver positions. Yep. And I'm not saying that was a mistake. All I'm saying is that, realistically speaking, when you pay T. Higgins and Jamar Chase that amount of money, you leave yourself with no margin for error for the rest of the position players, whether that be on the offensive line. And you know what, the other thing, too, it felt like they threw a little bit of bad money towards the offensive line in trying to fix a problem. And they tried. They tried. I mean, for everybody that comes out and says, oh, my gosh, the Bengals are malpractice and that franchise could care less about their quarterback, that is so far from the truth. And that's an outsider saying this. Like, I think that, if you look at it from a holistic perspective of what the Bengals have tried to do, they tried to fix the offensive line situation. They've spent money there. And the problem is they had a bad scouting department, or they had a bad decision by Duke Tobin or whoever else you want to blame it on. The front office, I don't care who you blame it on. They got players in there that are past their prime, that are trying to make ends meet right now, and they're getting exposed a little bit. And you add in the fact that you then spend a ton of money on skilled positions that rely heavily on a quarterback. And the unfortunate part is now you don't have a roster that the Jake Brownings can not hide behind. I don't make it sound like Jake Browning needs to hide behind anybody, but I think that if you're capable of running the ball, you can do some bootleg play action passes that can get him out of the pocket, that allow Jake Browning to use his legs and make some easy throws, and you can kind of progressively find ways to score that way. This offense isn't built like that. This offense is built to be behind an elite level quarterback that sits back there, that does all the processing for everybody, and ultimately makes all the plays. And that's what's being exposed probably right now. Now, having said that, you could find a way to possibly win a game because your defense does something special. But as you just mentioned, that's the piece of this team that's, quite frankly, the weakest link, if you had to sit there and suggest what thing that you need the most of. And now you find yourself in a spot where, unfortunately, let's also face it, nobody in this league, that includes the Chiefs, that includes whoever you want to say has had the best teams over the last 10 years. Nobody, for the most part, can lose their star quarterback and play meaningful football games and go and win them more times than not. So it's not like the Bengals have some unbelievable malpractice situation because their starting quarterback went down and there was just no identity to replace them. I do think that, yes, of course. I mean, there's multiple teams that you could point to that said, well, if they lose their starting quarterback, they can still be competitive. That brings up the last point I would make about the Bengals situation as a whole. Are you trying to be competitive, or are you trying to just be elite and win a Super Bowl and say that this is the one way that we're going to be able to win a Super Bowl? And it feels like the Bengals have decided, we think that we can win a Super Bowl by having elite level wide receivers, by having an elite level quarterback, and hoping that we can hit just enough in the draft to be able to help shore up the defense. And that's the way that we're going to get over the proverbial hump and do it. Unfortunately, when you don't hit in the draft, outside of maybe the first round, I'm not suggesting that Shamar Stewart isn't a good player or anything like that, but in general, Miles Murphy still, you're waiting on him to be a big time player, I'm guessing. I'm just saying that when you don't hit in the draft, you spend a lot of money on talented wide receivers, your quarterback goes down. It is what it is. I mean, we don't have to sit here and act like we don't know why the Bengals find themselves in the spot that they do.
Yeah, it's you brought up a point that I've said many a times, which is giving credit, and maybe they don't deserve credit, to the Bengals front office for attempting to shore up that offensive line, knowing how bad it was. I mean, we had Quentin Spain and Michael Jordan on our offensive line when we went to the Super Bowl. That's just not very. It's better now than it was then. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe the grades. It seemingly should be better now than it was then. The simple fact of the matter is there's a reason that that it's hard to get an offensive line in free agency, and that is because typically, if you have good offensive line players, you don't let them walk. Really, the only positions in football where you can consistently get good talent from the free agent market is like wide receiver, is cornerback, maybe even safety and linebacker. But typically, if you got a good quarterback, you don't let them walk. If you got a good offensive line, you don't let them walk. You got a good defensive line, you don't let them walk. And that's pretty much the end. Maybe you get some good cornerbacks that you don't let walk, but more often than not, if you got good talent, you keep them in the locker room. So to bandage over a terrible offensive line with guys that weren't re-signed elsewhere seems to be a really tall ask. That being said, the Bengals hit on some really good free agents like Trey Hendrickson. So
it's a red flag that the Chiefs were willing to
Orlando Brown,
allow Orlando Brown to walk. I mean, that could have been
an
obvious, not obvious at the time maybe, but I'm just saying that could have been a little bit of a red flag.
You're right. Yeah, it's the Trent Williams is never hitting the free agent market. I mean, the Bengals, I think, are the only. Andrew Whitworth hit the free agent market, which obviously was a bad idea. Bad idea back then, and I think they've learned their lesson. But that does it for Off the Bench, aka the Stone Shields lead-in show.
That's right.
Here from 10 to 11, we'll be back tomorrow talking about Monday Night Football, and we'll be gearing up for the Cincinnati Reds' first playoff game in 5 years. So we're excited for that. But without further ado, the Stone Shield Show.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. Another week here at the program. Appreciate everybody for stopping by, everybody hanging out with us from after off the bench. We will be here all week long. Got shows every single day this week. That'll be the plan, by the way, every single week. Didn't have a Friday show last week. Casey McAllister did a great job filling in on Off the Bench, but I have a full slate of shows this week as we begin another week here at the show. Got a couple of weeks now under our belts, and we're continuing to improve what we're doing here at the show. We'll get some more graphics going as well, and we'll continue to build off what we're doing here. I think we're off to a pretty solid start here at the show, and I certainly appreciate everyone that has helped us out here to this point. But certainly plenty to talk about here on a Monday. It is September 29th, and if you would have told me a month or two ago that we'd be sitting here on September 9th and the lead-in for the show would be the Cincinnati Reds, not just the Cincinnati Reds, but, oh, by the way, the Cincinnati Reds clinching the playoffs, we would be discussing that over a Bengals Monday Night Football game. I would be like, you're absolutely crazy for that. But here we are. The Reds clinch. They lose yesterday afternoon in Milwaukee, but they take 2 out of 3 in that series. It's good enough for them to move on. Big shout out to the Miami Marlins for helping us out and doing some damage against the New York Mets. What a disaster of a season for the New York Mets as they missed the playoffs. Cincinnati reaps the benefits of that. And, so there's this narrative, Cincinnati backed their way in the playoffs. I think they deserve a heck of a lot more credit than that, and we will discuss on today's show. Also, Monday Night Football tonight, Bengals, Broncos, big game for Cincinnati. Obviously, have a 2-1 record right now. Had the loss last week in Minnesota. Was awful, just about as bad as it could get. All the turnovers, the incompetence from the head coach, the offensive line, the run game, the quarterback. Disasters everywhere for Cincinnati last week, but an opportunity to right some of those wrongs here tonight. On the road, heavy underdogs, 7.5-point underdogs last I looked here to begin today's show, and a lot ahead of them and a lot to prove here tonight. Certainly have to show that they are going to have some fights and try to bounce back after the disaster that was last week. We previewed the Ryder Cup on Thursday. Disappointing if you're the Americans, obviously. You went into the Ryder Cup as favorites, as you should be as the home team in a Ryder Cup, but they were outclassed, outplayed from top to bottom. Frustrating. Lots of people on the European side ticked me off a little bit. I'm sure lots of other Americans feel the same way, but they had the better team out there. Some questionable decisions from Keegan Bradley. Do I blame him for the loss? I think he certainly deserves some blame. I'm a big Keegan Bradley guy. I was really fired up that he was the captain, but some of the decisions that he made over the course of the past few days, head scratchers, to say the least. And obviously, it did not work out for the Americans as they lose at home at Bethpage Black, home soil in New York. Very disappointing loss for the Americans. And really, they were able to right some of those wrongs yesterday with the singles matches, but it was probably a heck of a lot uglier than what the final score would indicate in that perspective. But since the Americans lose, and obviously not a great day to be an American golf fan. But Ravens also lost again the late afternoon window yesterday against the Kansas City Chiefs, and don't look now, but the Baltimore Ravens are 1-3. And, the Bengals obviously are struggling. We'll see what happens tonight. At worst case, they're 2-2 after tonight. And that's a pretty big opportunity there with a team that lots of people were writing in for the playoffs. Basically, everybody was writing in for the playoffs. But there's always a team or two in the National Football League that everybody says 100% they will make the playoffs, and they don't. Could that team be Baltimore? I'm not ready to say that just yet, but also an injury to Lamar Jackson, that certainly is very noteworthy as well. But as always, invite everyone to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We are live every single weekday here at the Stone Shield Show and Off the Bench from 10 to 11. Prior to that, plenty of content out on the channels. You have some clips from the show that go out on YouTube, and also with the Reds, plenty of exciting stuff going on as it relates to that. Trace Fowler, Nick Kirby, they've got you covered with Chatterbox Reds live in the ninth inning. I don't know if they're doing any adjustments with the playoffs, if they'll be live more than that, but they certainly will be live after the game in the ninth inning. There'll be a pregame show for hopefully just 2 games in Los Angeles, but perhaps 3 games. And that's going to be a heck of a lot of fun, and we'll obviously spend some time talking about Cincinnati here on this show. So let's start with the Cincinnati Reds. We left off last week, obviously on Thursday, and it was incredibly disappointing, right? You dropped the first 2 games to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and you're sitting there going, wow, you had an opportunity here, after sweeping the Chicago Cubs, an inferior opponent in the Pittsburgh Pirates. You're at home. You're telling everybody to pack GABP, and then it didn't, translate the way you were hoping it would. Those first two games, right? The offense didn't really show up. The pitching wasn't bad. It was fine, but it wasn't, at the level in which it possibly could have been. Paul Skeens just barely got the better of Hunter Greene. You lose that game. That was game 2. Obviously, you thought you could win game 1 with Singer, and then you go into that day game, that getaway game, and you're going, well, obviously, it is a must-win. And if you look back throughout the Reds season, if you're just going to take a step away and look at it from a broad perspective, there's several games, obviously, that are massive, massive games. Really a bunch of games, right? Because, it took you to 162 to get in, and you needed a little bit of help. So if one game didn't go your way, you're on the outside looking in. But that final game against Pittsburgh is massive, right? Low-scoring game. Didn't have a ton going in your favor offensively. You were just able to hang around. You had a lead early, and you were able to hold on to that. But the play from Noelvi Marte in the 9th inning, one of the best Reds plays of my life. He robs that home run, and he robbed the home run, by the way. That glove was way over the fence. I was gone, and he was able to jump up there, make that play. Absolutely incredible from Noelvi Marte, and the Reds hold on, and then they say, you know what, we had a chance going to Milwaukee. And, it was great to have a chance, but did you feel like it was the best chance in the world going against the team that, oh, by the way, has the best record in Major League Baseball and a team that has absolutely dominated you for what feels like forever? Cincinnati goes into Milwaukee, wins the first 2 games of that series. Absolutely unbelievable that they were able to do that. Obviously, Hunter Greene didn't pitch for the Reds, in that situation. There was the talk about, should they make him available for 162, move him up, whatever. Tito said we're going to stay put, and it worked out. Obviously, Cincinnati didn't win the game yesterday with Brady Singer out there. He certainly gave him a chance to win the game, but they only needed to take 2 out of 3 to get to the postseason, and that really, really is exciting. So we'll turn the page and look towards the Dodgers for a second. But, you have to recognize just how awesome this was for the Cincinnati Reds, right? I've been saying for a long, long time, all the way back till opening day this year, you make the playoffs, it's a success, and if you miss the playoffs, it's a failure. And I don't think that necessarily is how sports work all the time, right? With football, basketball, baseball, I don't think you necessarily can say make the playoffs, success, miss the playoffs, failure. But that was where I was with Cincinnati this year. And the season, obviously, is an overwhelming success here at this point because the Cincinnati Reds did, in fact, make the postseason. And there's that narrative that they backed in. I get it. They lost the last game of the year or whatever, but they went to Milwaukee and won the series after dropping the series to Pittsburgh. And to me, that's not backing in. Going to the best team, you can argue if they're the best team in baseball or whatever, the best record in baseball, you go into Milwaukee and you take care of business. That's called getting it done, in my opinion. And now they have some momentum here going into Los Angeles. But I said on Off the Bench, I've never really felt as disconnected as I did to an NFL Sunday in my life as I did yesterday. Obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals were not playing yesterday. They are playing tonight. But I'm sitting there, watching the Reds Live postgame, watching the celebration in the clubhouse. And just kind of, it's a pinch me moment as a Reds fan, right? Because, obviously it's been well documented. They haven't been in the playoffs since 13. I get they were there in 20. It was kind of the Mickey Mouse COVID year. Half the league made the playoffs. It was fun at the time, and it was exciting because you felt like they had a chance. But it wasn't a real, 162-game season where you really have to scratch, fight, and claw your way into the playoffs. We haven't seen that in over a decade. And we saw it, obviously, yesterday, talked on Off the Bench. It was just great to see Jim Day, right? I've loved Jim Day since I was a kid. He's covered the team since I was a kid. He's done a tremendous job covering the team. And he's been with them through some really tough times. And we all know, as Cincinnati Reds fans, there have been a lot of tough times as a Cincinnati Reds fan. And he's, worked through it through thick and thin. And then he had the opportunity in the clubhouse just interviewing all the players, getting doused in champagne and beer. They were having a great time. And they celebrated getting in big time. And you see some of these teams, whatever, they kind of just going through the motions when it comes to celebrating. They're not fully going crazy. I get it. Some teams have been there more than others, and it's a little bit different. But that celebration that transpired in Milwaukee yesterday was absolutely awesome to see it come together, to see Tito Francona in the clubhouse with all those guys. It's kind of a peek behind the curtain as we've been told by Tito and guys on this team, oh, it's a closely knit group, right? You know, we're willing to go out there and battle for each other each and every day. But you really saw that by how they celebrated in the clubhouse after the game. And that really kind of came to light. And that was kind of my biggest takeaway there as well. You got a lot of youth on this team. You also have some veterans, right? Gavin Lux obviously is your guy that has this postseason track record of playing in postseason games, has played in way more postseason games than anyone else. So that's good to have that kind of, experience going into a series against Los Angeles, but lots of other guys have not. Obviously, lots of players will be making their postseason debut. Trevino obviously was there a little bit for New York. A couple of other guys have had minimal experience in the postseason, but beyond Lux, it's really not much as it relates to postseason experience, and we're going to see what this team is able to do. But just the collection of the team, from the staff to the bullpen to the hitters, it's a tightly knit group. Cowboy, of course, had the cockroaches statement saying they can't kill us, they're like cockroaches, and the team really kind of embraced that. You heard him talking about that after the game there as well. And I think Terry Francona deserves a lot of credit. I was over the moon when Cincinnati was able to pull him out of retirement. Did I think it was going to fix all their issues? No. But I thought with Terry Francona that they had the opportunity to be a playoff team. Now, do damage, win a World Series. Obviously, the roster probably not in a situation on paper where you would say they are going to do that. But bringing in a manager with his experience, I think, speaks volumes. And there were several times throughout the year where they could have quit, where they could have rolled over and said, you know what, obviously not fully mail it in, right, but just understand that, we're out of this thing and we're not going to make the playoffs. And maybe they do that with David Bell. I don't, mean to hit David Bell with a stray there, but regardless, David Bell, he was here for a long time and really had no success when it came to getting a team to the postseason or giving a team a chance late in the season. That team for Tito Francona here in 2025 could have quit on the Cincinnati Reds several different times throughout the year. They did not. They kept fighting. And to me, that is a clear reflection of the manager, that he continued to believe in his guys, make them believe in themselves, and continue to fight on a night-in, night-out basis. And that is what that team did. Ton of credit for Tito Francona. Can you pick apart some of the decisions he made? Trace talked about it on off the bench, even some of the things he did yesterday. And let's be very clear, and let's acknowledge the fact that if Cincinnati loses the game yesterday, which obviously they did, and if the Mets win and get in the playoffs, we're having a totally different discussion here today. And it's candidly probably a relatively dark discussion there as well about, they had this opportunity, they came home and, they were playing the Pittsburgh Pirates and they lose the first two games of that series, and then they win a game in Milwaukee, they lose two, the decisions, question marks. Hunter Greene, he could have threw yesterday if they made some adjustments, he didn't throw, and we're having a totally different conversation. But with the Mets losing, that conversation gets turned on its head, and now obviously it's a very, very positive Monday conversation with the Cincinnati Reds, and that certainly is very, very exciting. Now, turning the page to Los Angeles, I think this team has a chance to win this series. I really do. If it's a 5-gamer or a 7-gamer, you're probably like, not the most ideal situation. The Dodgers, of course, defending world champions, right? They've got all types of dudes in their lineup. They got all types of dudes in their rotation. The bullpen obviously has been what has held them back and is, the reason why they're playing in this round probably, instead of, having a bye and just playing in the NLDS. So we'll see. The Reds offense obviously has been struggling but all season long, but it has gotten a little bit better here over the course of the past few games. A little bit more positive momentum as it relates to the Cincinnati Reds offense. But when you have the pitching, you always have a chance in the postseason, right? There's teams that are built on pitching, and there's teams that are they're built on offense. The teams that are built on offense are obviously a lot more fun to watch, right? Because you're getting in these games, you're putting the ball over the fence, you're scoring a lot of runs. Obviously, that is fun. But when it comes to the postseason, you would much rather, or I certainly would much rather, have a team that is more dependent on pitching, because that travels and that has the tendency to show up on a more consistent basis than hitting does. Right? If you're in a 3-game series and you have, for instance, guys that are hitting a ton of home runs, hitting a ton of extra base hits, and they just go quiet for a game or two, you're sitting there in an elimination game immediately going, how the heck did we get here? We've been scoring 8-9 runs a game all season long. Now we're in a spot where we have one off night at the plate and we're facing elimination. Whereas if you had a pitching-based team, you feel like that's going to translate a little bit to the postseason, right? It's been consistent all year long. Has this been the best rotation of my life for the Cincinnati Reds? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look each and every year, but it certainly feels like it here at this point. And the bullpen as well. The bullpen has been rock solid for this Cincinnati Reds team. And some of the adjustments they've made. I mean, Chase Burns in the bullpen, that's just another dude that you could throw out there and put him in a game, and he's going to come in and he's going to throw his fastball, and he's going to throw it really, really hard, and he's going to get you in a spot to get some guys out. I think that, the decision to move him to the pen has been absolutely outstanding for Terry Francona, and how he's managed it, right? Pushing the right buttons, getting the guys in there at the right time. And obviously the bullpen as a whole has really done a tremendous job. Connor Phillips, a guy that had, a lot of talent, was a highly, touted guy coming into the big leagues. And kind of before this year, his career hadn't really translated to how he had thought. Still a very young guy, obviously, but he has been sensational in the pen for the Cincinnati Reds. Emilio Pagan, has he blown a few saves this year? Yeah, are there some moments where Reds fans don't look at him and necessarily trust him as to be that kind of guy, to be that closer for this team? Yep, that's totally fair. I get that as well. But when you look at the numbers and look at the scope of the season, he's been a rock-solid closer for you. That's just the reality of the situation. And Tony Santillan is probably, I'm not going to say he's the MVP of the team, but he's one of the top guys, because Tony Santillan has been unbelievable. Tito has rode him throughout the whole year. I make the joke with a buddy like, oh, we play a game today. That means Tony Santillan, he's working. Right, Tony Santillan's coming into the ball game, and that's kind of how it felt for much of this season for the Cincinnati Reds. And Tony Santillan continued to answer the bell on a consistent basis for this team, and they're certainly going to lean on him in the postseason. So with Hunter Greene going tomorrow night, obviously all three games are going to be at 9:08 first pitch. We'll see, based on the games prior to that, if that gets pushed back at all, whatever the case may be. But 9:08 going to be the first pitch for all three of these games if it goes to 3. It's better than a 10-10 start for a fan, right? And it's better than, 1 o'clock game. Everybody has to work, right? We had, Trace was talking about, in years past where you got a wild card round. It's like, oh, how do you get out of work to watch this game, go to the game, what have you? That's not the situation right now, obviously, for the Cincinnati Reds. A little bit later, but a perfect opportunity to watch them play on the West Coast. And I totally agree with what those guys said about not having the pressure of being here in GABP for any one of these games, and having the opportunity to play in a bigger ballpark as well. Would it be awesome to have, the Dodgers come to town and you play them in a postseason game here? Yes. Would I try to get to the game? Absolutely. Would it be electric? Yes. Would the city be buzzing? Yes. But when it comes to winning this series, going on the road, you just had success on the road in Milwaukee, staying out on the road, going to the West Coast, playing in a bigger ballpark, where all the pressure is on your opponent. There's no pressure on the Cincinnati Reds at all. None. Zero. Literally no pressure. Now, you might be saying you're crazy. It's a postseason game. What do you mean there's no pressure? All right, obviously it's a postseason game. Fair. But as far as pressure to win, expectation to win? No, it doesn't exist. Everybody that watches baseball and knows anything about baseball knows that the Dodgers should win this series, and the Dodgers should advance. Nobody's sitting there saying, oh, this Reds team, they should win. All right, they need to win, right? No. Kind of just feels like this team, they're happy to be here. They kind of, snuck in at the last moment. They got some help from another team in New York Mets. That's fine. A lot of pressure on the Dodgers as they look to go back-to-back. And if you can get them in this first game and really put their backs up against the wall, put them immediately in an elimination game, you feel pretty good. Don't believe their pitchers, as of, we're sitting here live on the show right now, are released. Don't believe the Reds have said anything beyond tomorrow night's game, but you got Hunter Greene. Was he perfect against Pittsburgh? Was he as good as he was in the Chicago series? No, but he was really, really good. And if he pitches like that, you have an opportunity to beat this Dodger team. Absolutely. Right? Bigger ballpark there as well. But the dangerous lineup, you feel better about playing at that type of ballpark than you do playing at GABP against this Dodger team. Now, they're loaded, obviously. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman. The list goes on and on and on. We understand that. But with great pitching, you can go up and compete against any single team. And that's exactly what the Cincinnati Reds have here. Very, very exciting. We will certainly preview the game on tomorrow's show. We'll talk about it, the series, all week long. Really, really exciting for the Cincinnati Reds. Don't want to look too far ahead, obviously. But if they win, they're playing the Philadelphia Phillies. And that means there will be at least one playoff game here in Cincinnati. And that obviously hasn't happened since 2012. So that would be incredibly, incredibly exciting. And then if you beat the Dodgers, if you go to L.A. and beat the Dodgers, then you're sitting there and saying, okay, World Series, that's not out of the option. Now, I don't know what the odds are exactly. My guess would be that they have the worst odds out of anyone to win the World Series. Maybe it's someone else in the American League. I don't know what they are. But if you win, if you're in, you got a chance, right? This isn't like, the NFL where it's like, oh, Pittsburgh or Denver last year kind of snuck into the playoffs late and they just get abused immediately in the first round. It's not like that in baseball, right? It's a 3-game series. The Reds have obviously done a great job of winning series, and they've done a great job of competing against the best in Major League Baseball. Have they had success against the Dodgers this year? No. But against really good teams, this team has shown up. And it's not like you need to win 4 games to move on against this Dodger team. You only need to win 2. That certainly is beneficial. As it relates to the rest of the playoff picture in Major League Baseball, obviously you have the Padres and the Cubs. That will be at Wrigley Field. Winner of that plays the Milwaukee Brewers. And then obviously Reds-Dodgers. Winner of that plays the Phillies. And then we'll see beyond that, as after that obviously would be the NLCS, the American League side of things. The Tigers have that 6th seed. They're going up against Cleveland. What a comeback from the Guardians as they steal that division. Those two have to play immediately. And then you kind of have at the bottom half of that bracket the AL East kind of playoff, right? As you got the Yankees-Red Sox round 1. I mean, come on, how good is that? And then the winner takes on the Toronto Blue Jays, who, of course, are the number 1 seed in the American League and won that division. Incredible season from the Blue Jays. But you're in, you have a chance, and you really have a chance, obviously, if you can take on the Los Angeles Dodgers and have some success against them and win that series. But incredibly exciting morning, incredibly exciting week on the horizon for the Cincinnati Reds, as they're looking to, win a playoff series in advance for the first time in what feels like a million years for the Cincinnati Redlegs. Very, very exciting. Congratulations, of course, to the team. Congratulations to TJ Francona. He deserves a lot of credit for getting them to this spot. All right, let's shift the discussion here a little bit to the Cincinnati Bengals. That's obviously a really important game for the Cincinnati Bengals here tonight on the road against the Denver Broncos, 7.5-point underdogs. And let's go through some keys to victory as we typically do before the Bengals play a game. And key to victory number 1 for me is start fast, right? And you might be saying, oh, that's cliche. You could say that each and every week. Well, with a backup quarterback on the road, primetime game, it's really, really important to start fast in this football game. Does that mean necessarily scoring a touchdown the first time you get the ball? No, not necessarily, but it means having some productive offensive plays, picking up a first down or 2 the first time your offense has the ball, right? It's all on script there at that point, so it should be, a spot where you're Zach Taylor, where you can do some positive things and, move the football down the football field a little bit, all right? Defensively, they're going to have to play well. Bo Nix, you're a little bit worried in this spot because he hasn't played very well this year, and it kind of just feels like it's only a matter of time before he has a breakout performance this year. I think Bo Nix is a good NFL quarterback, and I think he's going to be just fine in his career with Sean Payton at the helm, and I think he's going to be just fine this season as well. But at some point, he's going to break out. Obviously, you're hoping it's not tonight if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, but getting a stop if you're on the field defensively, right, or holding them to a field goal. Those types of things can build some positive momentum for you. Right? You don't have Joe Burrow to save you, and I know we've said that a million times here on the show. But if you find yourself in a big hole late in the game, Jake Browning's proven that he can play winning football, but if you're behind on the road late, the crowd's really into it, you're probably in a bad spot. Have to find a way to start fast in this football game. Also, I want to see some creative adjustments in the run game. That's key to victory number 2, right? There's a lot of people nationally that now have built this narrative where they have the mindset of, oh, Chase Brown's not a good running back. And obviously, look, I get it. Nationally, it's hard to know exactly what's going on with every single team. But anybody locally that follows the Cincinnati Bengals understands that Chase Brown is a really, really good player. And he can be a really, really good player. And he was a really, really good player for you last year. Reed mentioned the stat on off the bench, how often he is getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's just, as a running back, there's only so much you can do at that point if you're consistently getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. Even if you can make the first guy miss, then you got 2 other guys waiting for you right at the line of scrimmage. And it's just really tough sledding there at that point. So I want to see some creative adjustments. I don't want to see this, oh, we'll just get under center and we'll turn around and hand the ball off, we'll run it right up the middle, and we'll hope that can finally work. Because clearly that has not worked. Whether it's motions, right, shifts that you got to do along, your offense, right, jet sweeps, I don't know. Right? Screen game, that's something that Jake Browning in 23 was really good at. getting the screen game going more, right? The screen game obviously can just be an extension of your run game, getting the ball to Chase Brown in the backfield, getting it to him in space, right? You have to find a way to integrate him into the game. And sitting there, turning around, handing it off, and letting him run up the middle and lose a yard or just get to the line of scrimmage is obviously not cutting it. Nobody's running the football worse than the Cincinnati Bengals in the National Football League. Candidly, it is not close, and there has to be improvements in that tonight. Now, it's a really good Denver defense. I don't even know if it's possible if Cincinnati can sit there and run for, 150 plus yards. I don't even know if that's a possibility, but it has to take a step in the right direction, and it has to be something that is at least a threat. Now, I get you got behind quickly against Minnesota, and you kind of had to, move off it, right? Can't afford to put yourself in that situation here against the Denver Broncos. Right? Does it mean you're always running on first down? Well, Romo was saying all week last week that they need to throw it on first down, then run it in second down. And he was right, because clearly they kept running it on first down, and it wasn't working. All right? I don't know when you got to run it, how often you got to run it, but you have to show the ability to at least threaten in the run game. Because if you make this Bengals offense one-dimensional with Jake Browning, you're in trouble, and you're cooked. You make this Bengals offense one-dimensional with Joe Burrow, you have a chance. But we've talked about it on the show. This isn't, a low-end starter coming in or a middle-of-the-road starter coming in. No, it's a backup quarterback. That's just the reality of the situation, and it's a team that is so Joe Burrow-reliant and Joe Burrow-dependent, and when he's taken away, it looks totally different. I don't care that you have Jamar Chase. I don't care that you have T. Higgins. That's all great, but without Joe Burrow, it looks totally different offensively, and the Bengals are going to have to be better around Jake Browning in order for them to have some success in this football game. Key to victory number 3. Got to win the special teams battle. McPherson's been solid this year, but he really hasn't been asked to do a ton when you break down those 3 games, right? Has he ever been in a spot where it's like, you're holding your breath, it's a huge kick, he's got to deliver? No. All right? But if the Bengals are picking up some first downs, getting it into Denver territory, and putting McPherson in a spot where he can kick some long field goals, and he makes them, that can put them in a really good spot in this football game as well. Because against this Denver Broncos defense, you're not necessarily always going to score a ton of touchdowns. Jake Browning's got to find a way to get the ball into Denver territory, and, obviously Mile High, the ball travels really far there. McPherson's proven he can bang some long field goals. You put him in a spot where he can help your team win, he's got to execute. The Bengals have to be really, really good on special teams. And they haven't always been good on special teams this year. I'm talking in the punt game, I'm talking in the return game, and I'm obviously talking in the kicking game with Evan McPherson. If he can have one of those kind of OG Evan McPherson performances, that certainly could help the Cincinnati Bengals win this game. Obviously, in a perfect world, you're hoping he's kicking extra points and not field goals. But against this Denver defense, considering what this offense has looked like with Jake Browning and even what it looked like without Jake Browning, you don't necessarily feel confident that is going to happen. And usually in the NFL, if you're playing a team and you're like, we want to kick field goals, well, that's a recipe for disaster. But in this situation with the backup quarterback, if you can find a way to get 3 points on the board, that can really, really help you in this game, especially with an offense in Denver that has been sputtering a bit to this point. It could be very beneficial for you. Evan McPherson's got to have a big game, and he can't afford to miss any kicks in this game for the Cincinnati Bengals. I would also like to see them use the middle of the field more in the passing game. Now, that could be tough against a linebacker like Benito, who Denver has and is one of the best linebackers in the National Football League. But when you look at what they've done, they haven't used the middle of the field enough, especially with Jake Browning. T. Higgins is a guy that can go over there and be a big-time target for you in hauling catches in traffic. You haven't used T. Higgins at all this year. So kind of piggybacking off of that, I want you to use the middle of the field more in the passing game, but I also want you to integrate T. Higgins into more what you're doing as well. You paid him top-of-the-line money as a wide receiver. Your philosophy this offseason was, we got Joe Burrow, and we're going to surround him with 2 studs, and we're going to do that for the foreseeable future. Well, you got to find ways to give him the ball. And I get it's Jake Browning and not Joe Burrow, but T. Higgins has to find ways to get his hands on the football. Because if you're going to pay him all that money and not use him, then what in the world are you doing? All right, does that mean forcing it to him? No, not necessarily. But when you have Higgins and you have Chase, you have to find a way to get them the football. T. Higgins is a really, really good player, and he hasn't done a darn thing this season for Cincinnati. Got to find ways to get him the football. Obviously, he had a massive game the last time you played Denver at home, right? One of the most exciting games of the season, the second to last game last year for Cincinnati. He was awesome. With Joe Burrow, he's had success against the Denver Broncos in the past. Obviously, find ways to give him the football. All right, he's a big dude, big frame, big hands, sure-handed guy there as well. and you got to find ways to give him an opportunity to help impact the game offensively for you, because obviously he has not done that at all this year for the Cincinnati Bengals. And lastly, key to victory number 5, got to show some heart in this football game. Usually teams in the NFL, after they get embarrassed, they respond well the next week. You saw it again yesterday. Atlanta got blanked, I think 30-0 against Carolina. What did they do? They responded and beat the Washington Commanders, played really well, and won yesterday. That usually happens in the NFL. And Zach Taylor's teams, as we've talked about in the show, have shown that they don't quit. They don't. The first time I've ever seen this team quit was the second half in Minneapolis last week. I've never seen that ever happen apart from last week. Now, if you're a head coach, you don't want to get into that pattern, because if your team quits on you more than once or twice, there's a good chance you're gone. All right, now I don't anticipate this team quitting on Zach Taylor. I really don't. But they got to show some fight in this game. They got to show, it's Monday Night Football. They're on the road. They're a huge underdog. 7.5 is a massive spread in the National Football League. I'm expecting them to come out with their hair on fire and run around and try to hit somebody and make some plays. Try to turn the football over defensively and try to do some good things on offense, have some explosive plays, find ways to score points against Denver. That's what I'm expecting. We'll see. Because if they don't, then it could be a real time where you're really in a dire situation if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. You're 2-1. Right? You got everything in front of you at this point. Joe Burrow, by the way, made a post the other day, and I believe the post said, this game will break your heart, and see you soon. And that the see you soon part is the part that got me fired up, because I always, said, with Joe Burrow, guys like Iron Man, but at some point you got to crack, right? And just be, frustrated and maybe not respond the same way as maybe you had responded in the past when you got hurt. But he said see you soon on the post. That honestly got me a little bit fired up. All right, and that told me that, shoot, if this Bengals team can hang around, he'll show up for them and try to get back and help them win meaningful football games late. So I think that certainly is a very, very positive thing. But as it relates to Zach Taylor, his team needs to show up. They need to show up quickly, right? Lots of eyeballs going to be on this game. Obviously, there's another Monday night game with the Dolphins and the Jets. But, for the most part, everybody in the whole the country is going to be tapped in to this game for the Cincinnati Bengals. And we'll see how they perform. I'm expecting them to show a lot of heart in this game. I'm expecting them to start fast. Does that mean scoring points necessarily right away? I don't know. We'll see. But I'm expecting them to bounce back and play a lot better than they did last week and look like a competent football team. The Ravens lost. The Ravens are 1-3. As I said at the top of the show, there's always a team or two where everybody nationally says, oh, yeah, they're 100% going to make the playoffs. And then they don't make the playoffs. Am I suggesting that's Baltimore? Not necessarily going to say that, all right, because we know what they're capable of. But at this point, you're 1-3. The numbers are what the numbers are. Teams that start 1-3 typically do not make the playoffs, and we'll see if Baltimore is able to bounce back. But a couple of stats as it relates to this Denver defense. The Broncos are tied. This was before the Rams played yesterday, so this was going into the NFL slate of games yesterday. The Broncos were tied with the Rams for the most sacks in the NFL with 12 and lead the league in pressures with 63. Obviously, that's going to play a big part in this game, especially considering what this Bengals offensive line has looked like over the course of 3 weeks. Jake Browning, another key. It wasn't in one of our keys to victory here, but another huge thing for Jake Browning will be making sure that he isn't throwing the football to the other team, right? His bad plays need to be incompletions, because if they're interceptions, team's cooked. If he's throwing the football to the other team, the Bengals are not good enough here with a backup quarterback and all the issues that they have on this team where they can overcome those types of turnovers. Now, obviously, all the turnovers haven't been his fault. Big fumbling issue last week, not his fault. But some of the interceptions are careless, they're reckless, and they flat out can't happen if Cincinnati is going to have success in this football game. He's going to be under siege tonight. He's going to get hit tonight. He needs to get the ball out and throw it out of bounds. He needs to find the easy completion, get to the check down, right? Because this Denver front is coming after him, and they're really, really good with what they can do defensively. Some guys that are really underrated. Zach Allen, he doesn't get enough credit. Zach Allen is really good at rushing the passer, and I'll be shocked if he doesn't have a sack tonight. DJ Jones at that nose tackle spot. really, really good. By the way, he was, a guy that was available in free agency that you could have went after, but you opted to keep B.J. Hill. Jonathan Cooper at that linebacker spot there with Benito. Those two guys are the real deal. And, oh, by the way, we haven't even mentioned the reigning defensive player of the year in Patrick Surtain. Now, Jamar's proven that can have success against him in the past, both in college and at the professional level. But, if things aren't going well, trying to get the ball to number 1, number 5 obviously has to show up. Interested to see what Surtain can do in this game because great cover guy, but he's a ball hawk as well, and he'll pick you off if you give him the opportunity. Jake Browning has to be really, really careful when it comes to targeting him. And obviously Hufanga, the safety, coming in from San Francisco in free agency. He's a really, really solid player, and he'll pick you off too, and he'll hit you hard as well. So this Bengals offense has their work cut out for them against all the pressure that Denver is able to create. Last week, the Broncos hit Justin Herbert 14 times and sacked him 5 times. And the Chargers, they're a really good team. Obviously, they lost and were upset by Jackson Dart and the Giants yesterday on the road in New York. But that's an offensive line for Los Angeles that is a lot better than what you have right here in Cincinnati, and that still gave up 14 quarterback hits and 5 sacks in the game. So Browning's got to have to get the ball out of his hands quickly in this one, and the Bengals are going to have some answers for what they do defensively, Vance Joseph and that Denver defense, because they're really, really good, and it's going to be a tough test. Certainly an uphill battle for Cincinnati tonight, but I'm expecting them to respond in a big way. Am I going to go out there and say they're going to win the football game? I'm not confident enough saying that, but I think it'll be a one-possession game. And they'll have opportunities to win the football game, whether it be capitalizing off a turnover, whether it be, executing in a goal line situation, 1st and goal from the 1 and finding a way to get it in. Even with Joe Burrow last year, you really struggle in those short yardage situations. Got to be good in the short yardage here tonight. I think it's a one-score game, kind of a go-either-way game, and we'll see. Because if you win this game, you're right back in the driver's seat. I get Pittsburgh one as well, but with what's transpiring with the Baltimore Ravens, you're right back in the driver's seat if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, if you can win this game. So I think it'll be close. I think they'll respond, and certainly looking forward to talking about it tomorrow on the show. All right, let's talk about the Ryder Cup here briefly before we transition a little bit more into the Baltimore Ravens. Very disappointing for the United States in the Ryder Cup. They came in as favorites, and when you have a Ryder Cup at home, I think you probably should be the favorites regardless, but when you kind of broke down what Team Europe had and what the Americans had, that kind of favored Team Europe, and you say, I think they got the better team on paper. And that certainly is very, very true. And they really just dominated the first 2 days of the Ryder Cup. When it came to the best ball stuff, when it came to the alternate shot stuff, they absolutely dominated it and kind of put the U.S. behind the 8 ball where it felt like you needed a miracle to even get back in the tournament yesterday and have a chance to win. And for the record, the Americans played great yesterday. They really did. And they gave themselves a chance. It was a shot in the dark, obviously, considering what transpired the first 2 days. But they had a chance. And I think, we talked about it on Off the Bench. It's not, is it just wins and losses, whatever? Yeah, I think in a Ryder Cup, it's just a win or a loss. But you at least had some guys that went out there and showed some pride with their performance yesterday. And you put yourself in a spot where you won a lot of singles matches. And, Shane Lowry misses that putt that obviously he was able to clinch on. You continue to give yourself a chance later into the afternoon. But, people are going to pick on Keegan Bradley. And there are other people that say, the Ryder Cup captain loser always gets, too much hate and not enough, credit necessarily when things go right. I love Keegan Bradley. I was fired up that he was the captain. Do I wish Keegan Bradley was playing for the United States? Yes. I get why he decided not to. He, thought his job was to come in there and, be the captain and focus solely on being the captain. But he deserves some criticism for how things transpired. Colin Morikawa, he didn't do much for you. I thought it was a questionable pick. I get it. You had 4 rookies on the team. Did you want to pick someone else and make it 5 rookies against a Europe team that only had 1? I get it. But to roll him out there with Harris English consecutive days, and they both times get absolutely blasted. Look, it's the Ryder Cup. And he said after day 1, he goes, we're not going to panic. We're going to stick to our plan. Well, it's really, you can break it into, 2 parts. You got the team stuff the first 2 days, and then it's just individual, matches, singles matches. And if things go really, really bad that first day, you might want to sit there and say, oh, I think we need to adjust a little bit here for day 2 instead of just hoping that things change when we just roll out the same exact team that we had. I don't think you're really in a spot to do that with the Ryder Cup. It's a 3-day thing. If things go so badly on day 1, you can't just say, we'll just try it again on day 2 and hope it works. It just doesn't really work like that. And that's what Keegan Bradley did. He did it with Morikawa in English, and he did it with Scotty Scheffler and Russell Henley there as well. Now, if the top player in the world, Scotty Scheffler, goes 0-4 in his first 4 matches, you're probably not going to win the Ryder Cup, right? Now, I don't blame Scotty fully for losing, right? I mean, the alternate shot stuff there with Russell Henley, that's not fully Scotty's fault, obviously. And look, some of the best hunters, they hunt alone. And we saw that. I think that is what Scotty Scheffler might be. Tiger Woods, people say he's the greatest golfer of all time, wasn't a great Ryder Cup player. Are you going to, have a similar situation here with Scotty Scheffler? I don't know. We'll see. But Scotty, of course, singles match is the last day against Rory. He takes care of business and gets a victory for the United States. So, when the best player goes 0-4 the first 4, you can't necessarily put a ton on Keegan Bradley for making the wrong call there. But just kind of running back some of the stuff he did on day 1, on day 2 was a bit of a head-scratcher for me. Morikawa and English going back out there, and Scheffler and Henley going back there as a partnership. Really did not understand that at all. But there were some things that you thought, were going to be a massive hit, and it didn't work out, right? The Thomas DeChambeau pairing to get the Ryder Cup going on day 1 on Friday. I thought that was going to be a great tone setter for you. The first hole was great. Then you lose that match. Who would have thought that Bryson DeChambeau and Scotty Scheffler as a pairing, as a team, would lose? I certainly didn't think that either. So, Europe obviously played better, and a lot needs to be done as it relates to the United States in these Ryder Cups, because the past 2 have not been close. They have not been close whatsoever, and there are some big-time adjustments that need to be made for Team USA to be better off in these spots. Luke Donald continues to be unbelievable as a Ryder Cup captain for Team Europe, and there isn't that stability with the U.S. I was fired up about Keegan Bradley. He said and did all the right things. From a leadership perspective, he was great. But as far as pushing the right buttons, when you get blown out like that, and it was a little bit closer than it should have been because you played so well in singles yesterday, he deserves some criticism for how things transpired for the Americans over the course of those 3 days in New York. And it's tough seeing for them, and they'll have to pick up the pieces and move on. But that's certainly not a habit you want to find yourself getting into. Losing a Ryder Cup at home on American soil, that's a big, big issue, and a lot needs to get cleaned up. So Keegan Bradley doesn't deserve all the blame. Scotty Scheffler, best player in the world, goes 0-4 in his first 4. DeChambeau, of course, he really struggled throughout the tournament as well when it came to winning and losing. So when that happens, your 2 guys that are leaders for you and should go out there and really set the tone, you're not going to have success. And ultimately, the U.S. did not. Rory played great. Say what you want about him. I'm not a Rory fan by any stretch of the imagination. There were some things that he did and said that are just flat out soft, in my opinion. But he played well. He played really, really well, and clearly was the best player in this tournament. He played like it. He talked a little stuff afterwards about it. He knows in his soul he ain't anything like Scotty Scheffler, but he was really good for Team Europe this week, and he was able to win. But that sight of seeing Rory and those guys celebrate and say all the things they were saying and get all in their feelings about the fans or whatever. I mean, when that happens and then they win, you're in a tough spot. So I think the Americans, leadership there for U.S. golf needs to figure out how that can't happen again, right? Because that simply can't happen. It's inexcusable on U.S. soil. All right, let's transition a little bit to the Baltimore Ravens. They played again. Now, they've had a tough schedule here to this point. But the Ravens, I think a lot of people were picking them to win the AFC. They were looked at as a team that was going to be a team that could compete for a world championship and win a Super Bowl. Lots of people were picking them to win the Super Bowl going into this year. A lot of people came back. You made some adjustments on defense. You added a couple of pieces, another year of Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken, and people thought, they were going to be a team that's going to be one of the best teams in the National Football League. Now you're sitting here at 1-3. And obviously that directly impacts the Cincinnati Bengals, because I'll admit, I said it on this show, I thought the Ravens were going to be the locks to win the AFC North. And they're still heavy favorites, by the way, to win the AFC North, and I probably would still pick them to win the AFC North, but this injury for Lamar Jackson, if this is something that's going to cost him time, I don't know how you can pick them to win the AFC North. Had the hamstring injury, obviously it's soft tissue, right? Those types of things can linger throughout the course of an entire season when you have a hamstring injury. So we'll see if he's able to play next week, how many games he'll miss. If he does miss time, the game kind of was out of hand. I mean, it's never really out of hand in the National Football League, but, when he left the game against Kansas City, the Chiefs really had a full grasp on that game. And, look, if they don't have Lamar Jackson, they got Cooper Rush. I mean, that's a very similar situation for the Bengals, but I would argue even worse. All right, the Bengals, with the backup, it's Jake Browning. I mean, they got a 2-1 record, so they kind of have a chance, right? But if you got Baltimore with 1-3 going to Cooper Rush, I don't see how you have really a chance at all. And that's one thing I didn't understand about the Ravens going with Cooper Rush as their backup. I think you should always model your backup after the playing style of your starter, right? That's what the Bengals kind of have done here with Browning. They like how he complements Burrow. Well, Cooper Rush doesn't complement Lamar Jackson at all. I mean, that's a totally different offense without him. And the counter argument to that would be, well, nobody complements Lamar Jackson. Fair, but like you had Huntley in the past, he can move around, right? I don't know. I mean, Cooper Rush is a statue back there, and if they have to roll with him, the Ravens are in serious trouble. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers obviously won in Dublin. Big win from them. Rodgers, he made some critical big-time plays. They're going to find ways to win games, and that shouldn't surprise anyone with what they have in Mike Tomlin. Arthur Smith, he's dialed up some nice stuff for them offensively. The defense, are they as good as they have been? Not to this point, but, they've been solid. Coming up in critical moments. The offensive line run game is still a massive issue for Pittsburgh, and I think it will continue to be. But if the Bengals can find a way to win tonight and kind of get right back into the thick of things with Baltimore faltering, they're going to have a big opportunity here. And I think if you're the Ravens, it's borderline time to press the panic button, especially if this injury for Lamar Jackson is going to be something that sidelines him for a considerable period of time. Right, and it very well could be here at this point. Now, on the flip side of that, the Chiefs, I was saying everyone was writing off the Chiefs. It was just, that's a little ridiculous, right, to write off the Kansas City Chiefs, and they proved that. I mean, them in the first half, I get the Baltimore defense has struggled this year. That's going to be an issue for them as we progress. But that looked like the Kansas City Chiefs of old, and I mean like a couple of years ago, what they were able to do offensively. Obviously, they get Xavier Worthy back. That is huge for the Kansas City Chiefs, but they're going to be a problem. All right, and with the Chargers losing the game against the Giants, they're going to continue to be a threat in that division and obviously a threat to win the Super Bowl as well. And people might laugh at that and say that's crazy. When you have Patrick Mahomes, yeah, that looked like Patrick Mahomes, the guy, right, yesterday with his performance against the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens, do they have a Chiefs problem? Yeah, but pretty much everybody has a Chiefs problem besides Cincinnati Bengals, right? So, we'll see. But I think that game yesterday is certainly a very, very critical game as it relates to the National Football League and obviously as it relates to the AFC North as well, with the Ravens slipping up once again and losing another football game against the Kansas City Chiefs. So certainly something to consider as we progress. Incredible week of college football there as well. I was joking around. You saw those tweets and posts on social media about, I feel for all the people that have a wedding here on this Saturday. I did. I was not getting married. I was at the wedding. I was in the wedding. It was a great wedding. And, look, I wouldn't miss that kind of a weekend in sports for many things, but I'd miss for that wedding. It was tremendous. It was awesome. But did miss a lot of the college football that transpired. How about the Alabama Crimson Tide, right? It's one of our best bets of the weekend. Alabama, they were able to come through and beat Georgia on the road, a team in Georgia that hadn't lost at home since prior to COVID, right? 2019, they had 33 straight wins at home. Alabama's able to show up in a big way. And Kalen DeBoer silenced a lot of doubters, right? Because there's people after the Florida State game calling for his job, saying, he's not the right man for the job. Am I saying that he's 100% the right guy for the job now? Not necessarily, but he certainly has turned the heat down on that hot seat. And obviously with Kalen DeBoer teams as well, the big knock on him, apart from a lack of physicality and a lack of discipline, was that they can't travel and play on the road. Well, they went in between the hedges in Athens and played tremendously on the road. Really did a nice job in that football game from a discipline standpoint, from a playmaking perspective, and they did some good stuff on defense as well. All right, even in that that first game against Florida State where you had all kinds of questions, but you also were sitting there saying, oh, this defense might just be flat out bad. It was the Georgia offense that was going up and down the field against Tennessee a couple of weeks ago at Neyland Stadium, and that Alabama defense responded, only allowed them to 21 points in that football game. So that's positive. Got Tim Keenan back there on the interior. That's big for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Got Jam Miller back at that running back spot. That is huge as well. And Ty Simpson, I've been saying even since they lost that first game to Florida State, I've been saying that, hey, is this team going to win a ton of games, compete for a national championship? I don't know about that, but they have a quarterback, and they certainly do. And Ty Simpson, he might be playing the best quarterback out of anybody in the country. He's got great mobility. He can move around the pocket. He can move outside of the pocket. He can extend. He's tough. He's got a rocket for an arm. He can make all the throws. I mean, he was slinging that thing against Georgia. He was doing it against Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago before the bye, and people were like, okay, it's Wisconsin. It's a bottom-level Big Ten team. Can he do it against a formidable SEC opponent? Well, he certainly did against Georgia. He played really, really well in that game. He's a threat with his legs. Ty Simpson, nobody's talking about him for Heisman yet, and I'm not, that's getting a little bit carried away, right? Big one coming up for Alabama against Vanderbilt this weekend. But look out. 15 for the Crimson Tide. Ty Simpson might be a guy that you need to think about when it comes to winning the Heisman Trophy. Also, another guy would be Julian Sayin as well for Ohio State. Lots of people kind of questioned how Ohio State would look in the game. Defense travels. We all knew that. And Matt Patricia did a tremendous job, again, for Ohio State. I believe 6 points for Washington in that game. But Julian Sayin, people had questions about him. His first road start, right, as the guy for Ryan Day. I thought he responded well. Did they protect him a little bit? Yeah, maybe. But Ohio State, very clearly, as a quarterback, Ohio State, in my opinion, very clearly the best team in the country. At this point, they go on the road to Husky Stadium. Loud environment. Again, I said this late last week. Washington should have been a ranked team. The fact they were unranked is kind of a joke. Didn't get a single vote in the AP poll. Don't understand that whatsoever. So that feels like a ranked win for Ohio State, another ranked win, and they were able to go on the road and do a great job in that game and beat the Washington Huskies. So that was obviously another big-time game in college football. Oregon-Penn State, incredible game that was, right? Double overtime thriller. Another best bet of the weekend. We had Oregon in that game. Dan Lanning, his crew, able to overcome some adversity. I mean, when you get in a double overtime game situation, right, it's kind of a coin flip, right? In terms of, okay, who's going to come out on top in this game? So I'm not writing Penn State off at all. To be honest with you, I didn't think it would be as close as it was. I thought Oregon was going to control, the game a little bit more than they did. Obviously, they made a few extra plays there at the end. Dan Lanning was certainly very fired up after the game. Very, very fired up after the game. He kind of let out a real big, yell there at the end of the game. It looked like he was he was a little juiced up after the game. And if you've seen the clip, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But big win for Oregon. Dante Moore, thought he had a really solid game. I thought you saw some more stuff from Drew Aller in the game. You're kind of just waiting this year. People say, like, could he be the first quarterback off the board in April? Yeah, maybe he could be. But he didn't really have a signature performance. He played solid in the game, and by no means the reason that they lost that game for Penn State. It was kind of a go-either-way game. But once again, James Franklin loses another big game. All right, hasn't beaten a top 10 team since 2016 when he beat Ohio State, and that was kind of a fluky win, to be completely honest with you there as well. So Penn State's, again, I didn't expect it to be as close as it was. They showed me that they can still compete. They have a lot of work to do, but obviously the monkey on their back is they can't pick up a big-time win. And we'll see if ultimately they are able to do that as the season progresses. Plenty more opportunities for them as well. USC, we were kind of gassing up USC a little bit on the show last week. They ran into an Illinois team on the road, and Illinois outclassed them a little bit there. As USC cooked, not going to say that, one loss. They've still played solid. They had an opportunity there. They made it close there at the end, showed some stuff there in the fourth quarter. But Illinois responded in a big way after getting smoked 63-10 by Indiana. And they responded in a really, really big way with a win. So I think that shows you a couple of things. One, I think Illinois is still a fine team. It's hard to say that after you lose 63-10, but Indiana might be a really solid team there as well. Obviously, they had to play Iowa this week, and that game was really solid there as well. So, there's a lot of things that are going to transpire Indiana held on to that game late, right, against Iowa. Iowa, could they be a solid team as well? Yeah, there is. There's some solid teams in college football. And while I just said that I think Ohio State certainly is the best team here to this point, I think there's really a group of like 15 or so teams that have a legitimate chance to win the national title. Maybe not 15, maybe like 12 teams, which is funny because obviously it's a 12-team playoff. But I think there's a lot of teams that could perhaps win the national title, and really an incredible weekend of college football there as well. And we'll spend some time throughout the week more detailing that a little bit more, spending some time talking about some of those games. But the Reds, of course, they are off tonight. They're hopefully getting their bodies and minds right after a full night of celebration, I'm sure, in the clubhouse. I'm sure that carried over to the plane there as well. But hopefully Hunter Greene kind of cooled it down a little bit after, a couple hours after that Milwaukee game because he's got the biggest start of his life coming up around the corner tomorrow night in Chavez Ravine against the Dodgers. Certainly a lot to be excited about. We will be previewing that tomorrow on the show and hopefully talking about a Cincinnati Bengals win as well as they head to Denver. 7.5-point dogs to face the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football. But that is another show in the books here at the Stone Shield Show. Appreciate everyone that stood with us throughout the entirety of the program. Had some good viewership here today, and we certainly appreciate it. Hopefully we can build off that throughout the remainder of the week there as well as we begin another week here at the show. Certainly fired up and certainly excited that all of you guys are joining us as well. So go Bengals, Houday. Hopefully they can pull up a big win tonight, against the Denver Broncos, and we can talk about it tomorrow here at the show. The Reds obviously will get their series underway on Tuesday. Hunter Greene taking the hill against the Los Angeles Dodgers. But that'll do it for this edition of the Stone Shield Show. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. And as always, the podcast will be up in a short period of time wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it. It will be there. So if you miss any of our show, you know exactly where you can get it with our podcast, the Stone Shield Show, wherever you get your podcast. But that'll do it for today. Till tomorrow, take care, everybody.